of my journal. I'm Stephanie Rivers. Come on into the conversation. We are multicasting on several platforms, so you might be watching on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn. On whatever platform you're watching, we want to welcome you to the conversation. And if you're new to the conversation, welcome and please become a follower so that when I post new things, you'll be one of the first to know. And if you are returning, we want to welcome you back. Today, we have a special guest because it's Memorial Day weekend. It's a time when Americans celebrate loved ones and community leaders who are no longer with us but have left a legacy, and their acts of service live on long after they are gone. Anthony Davis was one of those people. He was a son, a brother, and a father. At 32 years old, he was just starting to make his mark in the world as a small business owner when he was murdered. July of 2023 will make it 2 years since Anthony Davis was shot to death in his own home. His mom, Tarina Hodge, is my guest today. We want to welcome her to the conversation. Welcome, Miss Hodge.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So before we know, although it's been almost 2 years, I'm sure that a parent never gets over the loss of a child, regardless of how old the child was. So our condolences go out to you and your family.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Before we get into what happened to Anthony in his death, tell us a little bit about his life as an adult and as a father and a son.
Well, I would say that was my only son, of course. Like you say, you never get over it. Each day is like the first day. It gets better, but you don't get over it. But he was a father. He had one daughter, Montreal Davis. She lives with me right now. I have custody of her. Of course, we all miss him every day. He had one sister, so I had two children. He was running a small business where he sold electronics like car radios, speakers. He also did contract work where he would install security cameras, remakes, remodel homes. And he just was a joyous person. He always was smiling. He always made the best of whatever uh, life threw at him. He wasn't a saint, of course. He had some issues early on, but he was getting it together. He had his business. He was doing good. He helped a lot of people after his death. After his death, a lot of friends, family, people that I didn't even know lives he touched. Told me he would come by, check on them. He was just always a happy-go-lucky person. He was a no nonsense, but very, very positive, happy-go-lucky.
And I met you after that. So again, I wish I would have had a chance to know him, because when I look at your pictures on social media, your family looks so happy and together, and you are a jovial person as well. So I know he probably got that demeanor from you. So
Somewhat, yeah. Me and his father, he's a lot like his father. He's a little like both of us.
well, now tell us about his what happened. What were the circumstances surrounding his death? So it was July 13th after July 4th. Like, what
It was
was the day like?
it was the 24th of July.
July the 24th. Okay. So
Uh,
what was going on?
well, I don't. He had come by here that day to earlier in the day, probably around 6 o'clock. Help my niece change her tire. She had a flat while she was here at the house, and so my normal Friday night, watching late night movies, uh, getting ready to go to bed, probably about 5 a.m. because on Fridays that's my time to myself. I stay up, watch movies all night. The phone ring and it's JPS asking me, am I the mother of Anthony Davis? And I'm like, yes. And, they told me he's been shot. He's really, really sick. So I let them know I was on my way. I get to the hospital, um, seen him in a state that was just unbelievable. By this time, I get a call from his girlfriend, Monica, asking, crying, saying they won't let her in the room. She don't know what's going on with him. And I'm like, well, I'm headed to the room right now. As soon as I get in there, I'll call you. But before I could get in, I got in there, talked to the chaplain. They kind of, there was a police officer at the door. And I'm like, well, this is strange. I'm thinking, did he do something? Is he under arrest? Well, the police officer kind of explained to me that, he was, they really don't know what happened, but the girlfriend told them that he was robbed, that she was in the house, she heard shots, she opened the door, he fell in her arms, and that's all she know. And she had her son to call 911. Well, I called his dad got up there, my daughter. They wouldn't let my daughter in. They wouldn't let anybody else in but me and his father, because they didn't know what happened. And they could only say that they knew we are the ones who didn't do it. And I'm like, well, what is going on? So by this time, she's constantly calling me and calling me. So I talked to her and I'm like, well, what happened? She told me that same story, maybe a few steps a little different, saying that, Anthony, he was outside. We was getting ready to go to Houston. It was, he was packing the car. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like him. He's not going to be doing that at midnight. He
Mm-hmm.
would never let a person get up on him at his home, because he was a small business owner. He was always very cautious. Things he would tell me, Mom, go home a different way. Don't go that way. He was very, very cautious, very, very alert. And so she said she thought somebody had robbed him. The contents of his wallet was all over the driveway, spilled all over the driveway. So by this time, the nurse brings me a note and said that call this detective if he passes, because he was losing a lot of blood. When I got there, he was really cold to touch. And I knew at that point something was wrong, but I was still hopeful. I prayed, talked to him. The nurse was like, talk to him, hearing is the last thing to go. So they took him to surgery. They came back. He didn't make it. Well, before I could call her, well, by the time I called her, she's at his shop, his electronic shop, and she's removing everything of value out of the shop. She said,
Mm.
well, we're partners, so I just wanted to make sure that nobody else that had keys went in there and took anything. Well, I'm like, he was in surgery and you're taking things out of his shop. So, I still gave it a benefit of the doubt. She came over to the house for like 3 days, mourned with us, laid in my granddaughter's bed, comforted her, just mingling with the family. And then maybe the fourth day, when I getting ready to go to the cemetery, I was looking at see where I was going to bury him. And she was like, well, if you bury him where my mom is buried, I'll pay for it. I'll help pay for it, whatever I can do. And, I was like, and I prayed that day before I left. I was like, Anthony, you got to let me know what happened. You got to let me know who shot you. And maybe a few hours later, she calls me, the girlfriend, and said, I have something to tell you. And then she went on to tell me that, well, uh, me and Anthony was arguing. He pulled the gun on me and my brother shot him.
Wow.
Well, the detective called me a little later and said that the brother the brother confessed to shooting him, but they Monica had her son to clean up the blood, which had to move his body to clean up the blood, because originally now we thought the shooting happened outside on the porch. Well,
Okay.
he cleaned up the blood, threw the gun in the lake, put all the contents of his wallet in the driveway as if he had been robbed.
Hmm.
And so they didn't do any forensic. They didn't get her clothes. He had left the scene, came back. They let him just come back in the house. This is the brother. They didn't get his clothes. They didn't forensically interview the child who was there doing the shooting. And so by this time, they charged them with tampering with evidence. They charged Monica and her brother with tampering with evidence, concealing a crime. Well, I've been pushing for over 2 years. Even before that, I was pushing the Fort Worth Police Department. I'm like, this is not right. I think she did it. Because of, just me being a private investigator, looking at the projections and the things that I saw in the case, the bullet went through his stomach, through a living room wall into the bedroom. So I knew that person had to be right up on him to shoot him. And he was the type of person, if you knew him, would never have let her brother get in the vicinity to shoot him, because he was so cautious. So she said he had a gun. and she had a gun, but her brother didn't know neither one of them was going to shoot each other. Well, that Anthony was going to shoot her, so he shot him and ran. Just, if you looking at where he supposedly shot him and all of that, nothing matches up. So I pushed and pushed the police department. They just kept giving me, assuring me that this is a veteran detective. He did his job or whatever. But what he didn't do is he didn't forensically interview that child. He didn't do a lot of stuff and the district attorney pretty much admitted to that. She said the problem with the case is that the police department didn't do a lot of things to help them when they got the case. A lot of stuff was lost. They didn't dump the phones the way they were supposed to get text messages between her and her brother. But all of Anthony's text messages up until about a day before the murder were deleted. His phone was on airplane mode. I had to hire an individual forensic person to break into his phone to even get messages. And there's messages in there from her saying, I'm not going to let you leave me, different stuff like that. And so,
well, before you go on, and sorry to interrupt, but I do have up the picture of Monica Brooks, and you said they at the bottom is saying the charge tampering with physical evidence and that's $5,000 bond. So you only have to come up with $500. Is that how it works?
Well, if that no, it's yeah. Well, it's 10%, really. It depends on what bondsman you use.
And then this is her brother, John Brooks. And so also charged with tampering with physical evidence, no bond. And so after, so I'm just curious, and maybe you've explained it, but why would they only be, I know why they are charged with tampering with evidence, because they moved stuff around and you said they had to move his body to clean it up, but why would they only be charged with that?
Well, what the district attorney tells me is that with me pushing and calling, never got to speak with, Sharon Wilson, not saying it would have made a difference, but I did ask on several occasions, but I just kept getting alternates. They're saying that the detectives didn't do a good enough job that they can prove murder, that because John had a right to reasonably think that Anthony was going to shoot Monica. Now, there's no evidence that Anthony had a gun except for Monica and John's word.
So there was no gun that was left by.
She told him she took it and put it up so he wouldn't get in trouble. Now, when they found his body, he had a gun in his waistband, so he couldn't have pulled his gun and put it back in his waistband.
Right.
So she said she took the gun he had and put it up.
So then now she's saying he had two guns, basically.
And she had two guns. Now, now him having a gun, but it was in his waistband. So at what point did you take the person's word that actually cleaned up the blood, had her 10-year-old son clean up the blood, move his body, and throw a gun in a lake? How do you just take their word for he having a gun and it was self-defense?
Right. And so you said the district attorney said that the police officers, right, it's kind of like, even if you're brand new at investigations, don't you have a list of things that you go down, and then because you said you are a private detective, right, or you work with
we're moving away from gun residue because they could wash their hands out. Well, I don't care that you're moving away from it. You're still doing it. Why not? She probably wouldn't have had it because they used bleach to clean up the blood. Well, you didn't.
But still,
you didn't
right.
They didn't even have her clothes. They don't know where. They said they asked her for her clothes. She said she didn't know where they were. The blood splatter on her clothes would tell the story. Did he have blood on his clothes? Whoever shot him was very close to him, because this bullet went through him, through a wall, and into a bedroom. So honestly, I think she shot him. I could be wrong, but either way, one of them did. And I think Fort Worth botched the case, and I don't think the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office really put forth the effort needed to get an indictment.
So, and you know, it's hard enough when you lose someone and then to violence and then to realize that the person who did it, you know, who it's likely based on evidence that they had something to do with it, could or has gotten away with it. Um, so yeah, and I was asking you, what did you think happened, and you think that something happened between she and him, and
Uh,
maybe and her brother came to her defense, or she drew him in to
right.
help her to
Well, I do believe he said it because she has children and he doesn't. He's been to prison several times. I even asked the DA to send it to the feds because, as a felon, he shouldn't have had a gun. But of course, in state law, you can have a gun at your home after 5 years, but by Fed law, you can never have a gun. And then the DA, of course, tell me they won't take it. Well, how do you know if you haven't asked? Let's see. I'm trying everything, and I just don't think they care enough about black on black crime or crime in the reverse. Because I do think if this was my son, and Monica was shot, I think he would have been arrested on the spot with
mhm.
references. They even knew something was wrong that night because they wouldn't even let her in the room. So why didn't you investigate the case automatically like a murder or like, assault or something, that something had happened?
And you know what? There is there's a law. I think all cities have this law whereby if you end up discharging a firearm in the city limits, that's against the law. So the least they would do, like you said, is to arrest her and or charge her for that, you know, discharging a firearm. And her brother, let's say her brother did it,
Right.
discharging a firearm, and then he's already a felon, or he was on probation or parole, or and then that's parole violation.
Well, he was
So
a felon. He wasn't on parole. He was out for parole, but he was still a felon. And by federal law, you can never possess a gun again. The thing about it is, one of them did it, and the case was botched. And the police department did not do a good job for me to be able to get justice for my son. And it's really disheartening, and it really puts a bad taste in your mouth when you think about how they can solve crimes when they really want to.
when they want to, and right. So what has your family decided to do at this point, to fight, you know, filing some type of claim against the police department for malfeasance or negligence or something?
Well, I'm in the process of talking to some people, but me knowing I've been doing legal work for almost 20 years now, it's not much I'm gonna be able to do because of the immunity that they have in it. Them doing things in the scope of their job, it's gonna be really difficult to do anything. Um, but I am, of course, I'm gonna put it out here as much as I can to let the public know, and maybe there's things people can do early on to push it a little harder, because when you're grieving, you pushing it, but you're grieving at the same time. So it's only so much stress you can take. Um, I'm pushing the police department, I'm pushing the DA, but I'm grieving. And I'm trying to help my granddaughter grieve, trying to help my family. The fact that this girl came to my house for 3 days straight, rode in my car to different cemeteries, acting like my son had been robbed, to me is enough. The fact that she had a 10-year-old son to clean up the blood, throw the gun in the lake, that's enough to say something, to get an indictment if you really want to. If she
Correct.
would have left, if my son would have pulled the gun on her and her brother shot him and you left everything like it was, I would be okay with it. But that didn't happen.
Hmm. Right. So they were, I mean, it feels like and looks like they were covering up something, right? Because if it happened like you said, then why go through all that trouble to cover things up and then, yeah, pretend? It's just so heartbreaking that people that you feel like you can trust and are, you know,
Sleeping with,
are not trustworthy.
yep. That's sleeping with the enemy. And now don't forget, Stephanie, that while he was in surgery, she was at his shop taking out all of his valuables. I didn't get any of my son's stuff except for some old clothes and old shoes. She has all of my son's belongings, all of
Mm.
them. She took the stuff he had at her house. She didn't give me. You know, she gave me like a few things. The detective even said that it looked like he was moving out. She said he was moving out because the video from a neighbor saw him going back and forth to his truck putting stuff in it. Now, when I got his truck, there was nothing in it. When she finally gave it to me, she acted like her car was in the shop. We later found out her car was not in the shop. You know, so everything he had put in the car that night was no longer in his truck. She had taken it out, but she took everything of value out of his shop, all of his the product he had just purchased to sell, everything. She took it out. And there's a witness that was there with her that said that she told him help her get all the valuable stuff.
Mm.
Now we have this, the detective, the district attorney talked to this person. They talked to friends and other people that said that she was always the aggressor in their arguments. You know, he would come and have scratches on his neck. You know,
Mm.
there's no doubt that she was the aggressor and something went wrong here. And I just think they don't care when it comes to these type of crimes, and it's not a public uproar.
So let's fast forward to earlier this week when there was a recent decision by the grand jury to no bill the charges filed against Monica and her brother. What does no bill mean? And explain that to us.
Well, they only went to the grand jury on for him, not her, because he, again, when the detective, once he told the detective he did it, the detective stopped investigating. That's another problem. But a no bill means that we can't get an indictment. That however many people is a grand jury has 12 people. I've been on 3 grand juries. I know that a DA can get an indictment when they really want to. But I think all of my calls and all of my complaints, they took it to the grand jury and just got it over with. And just was like, because I asked her, will you present this as a true bill? She said, I can't tell you that. So if you present it as a no bill, you're going to get a no bill. There's a 10% chance you don't get what you asked for. But being on previous grand juries, you 90% of the time the district attorney get what they ask for.
Hmm. So, this speaks so much to knowing, knowing the process,
Yeah,
because you being in the process and being a part of the legal profession, you probably knew what to do or knew who to talk to more than the average person would. And then it still didn't work out, for your family to get justice. And then it speaks to being knowing who your elected officials are, because and
yeah,
holding them accountable. So when this DA comes up for reelection, um, bringing these things forward and looking, and maybe this is not the first time, and like you said, it wasn't necessarily the DA's fault, but at some point somebody's got to be held accountable, because if it was
yeah.
their son that got shot and killed, they would have made damn sure somebody got indicted.
Absolutely. And although it wasn't their fault, and her thing was we don't have enough investigators. If we look for the police department to give us the case fully investigated. The problem is the fact that detective stopped investigating after her brother said I did it. That was a problem because you just took his word for it. He's going to say he did more investigations, but he did not forensically interview that child, which was so crucial. Even by the words of the district attorney, it was vital that you forensically interview that child. It was vital that you did a search warrant on that house. It was vital that you did a search warrant on their phones and get text messages, because we all know no matter how much is on TV, people still tend to text. We know when she was here at the house, she started posting like pictures of my son, like every picture in her phone. And when she was asked why she was doing this, she was saying so she could have access to him. So she fully expected them to take her phone, but they
Mm.
didn't do it.
Now, does this give you? Do you think there's any like link or I'm just thinking of the Shanquilla Robinson case and where her friends and they went to Mexico. She
Right.
ends up dead. There was a video of that, of course, but then they came back and said no charges.
Absolutely.
So what is going on in your opinion, because you're in the profession, with so much evidence that should lead to charges and a indictment, and then there's no charges?
Well, they try to tell you that, like she was telling me, even if I got an indictment, I'm gonna have a problem with the case. Well, every case has a problem unless you have a confession. Everything is circumstantial. I think the DA pick and choose the cases they want to fight for. I think there's not enough people pushing them to make sure that black on black crime is prosecuted just as fast as any other crime. And that's the problem. Like, I mean, even back 15 years ago, my brother was murdered and his best friend. They plea bargained with the guy for 10 years against our wishes. So that's how upset I am with them. Even on this tampering case, they haven't been keeping me updated with when court dates is and everything, except for now that I'm really putting up a fuss. Like, there should not and better not be a plea bargain without me being notified.
So he is still under charges
Both,
for
yes,
both of them.
both her and her brother still have the felony of tampering with evidence, uh, hindering or hiding the criminal act.
Then so that's still ongoing. um what advice would you give to other families, one, about the company you keep? Did you know that they were at, like, people come out after the fact and say, yeah, she was the aggressor and all of that, he had scratches on him. Were you aware that it was kind of like a volatile relationship? Or some people, that's just how they have relationships, they fight back and forth?
Yeah, I knew that they had some issues. There's some things, times he talked to me about, mom, she crazy or this and that. And my opinion was always, son, if you think that if it's like that, then maybe you need to not be in a relationship. But I never wanted to be that parent that overstepped my boundaries in my kids' relationships. I wanted them to be able to choose for themselves. Now I feel like I probably should have, you ride that fine line on where you should voice your opinion and shouldn't. I didn't know it was to the extent of what it is, because of course people kept things from me that now they're telling me, like the daycare, his father in on a daycare, and his wife on a daycare. The neighbor says she ran over his feet. She ran over him with the car one time.
Mm.
I had no idea of any. So you find out, you might know a little things, but you don't really find out until, because when she was always at the house, she was always just really quiet. She never did anything in front of me. I never, witnessed anything. My daughter did, of course. Even afterwards, she tried to, she still was kind of acting like I should talk to her.
Hmm. Mm.
So it's really weird. But one thing I will say, Stephanie, that there's no statute of limitation on murder. Just because one grand jury said no, don't mean it can't happen again. So you have to always watch your back, because I'm one of them people that will always, until I have no longer have breath in my body, be pushing for justice.
I'm going to see about doing some research on the DA's office in Fort Worth and seeing what their record is when it comes to prosecuting cases like this. So we appreciate you coming on, and this, as I said, it's Memorial Day weekend, and I'm going to make sure that we repost this so people have a chance to see it throughout the weekend. So you'll be seeing it as well. Any parting words of wisdom that you want to share for families and people who might be going through similar? Oh, you also told me that
A
you
nonprofit.
started a nonprofit called Stolen Fathers to commemorate your son. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, Stolen Fathers, I created it and I wanted to kind of be not victims assistance, but I did want to assist children who have lost their fathers to a tragedy, whether it's a murder or any other kind of tragedy, because uh, kids go through a lot with this. Like even with my granddaughter, they don't talk about it, but I wanted to be that activist to help that child, whether it's through the justice phase of it, helping the kids if charges are filed, helping their parents, helping them get through the justice system, helping them with counseling, helping them with anything that I can assist them with because they lost their father to a tragedy. I'm not trying to oust mothers, but I lost my son. So this is my why. I want to help kids who lost their children to a tragedy. So we started
Sweetie.
Stolen Fathers.
So, and how can they reach you? This is your Instagram page, Stolen Fathers, and you also have a Facebook page as well.
Yes, and I do have a website which is Stolen Fathers, but it's under construction. It should be up within the next couple of weeks. And then we're going to roll out and we're going to hit the ground running with helping these kids get counseling, get mentorship, just getting back to being focused because of that loss.
All right. Well, we appreciate your time, and if there's any other developments, we welcome you back so we can talk about it.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing. You shed a light. You shed light on a lot of things that's going on. So we definitely appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. Just trying to do my part. Um,
Absolutely.
so have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll keep in touch.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye. And we want to thank you. We were talking with Miss Tarina Hodge of murder victim Anthony Davis, and we also, that led me to think about the Shanquilla Robinson case, where Shanquilla was in Mexico with frenemies, basically, and she ended up in an altercation, a fight, and with those frenemies, some of those frenemies, and ended up dead. They left her there, came back to the United States, and after a few months, the FBI or whoever it was who was doing the investigation said there are going to be no charges filed against anybody. That's what they said. That's the last thing we heard. At any rate, Shanquilla's family's attorney is Sue Ann Robinson, no relation, just last name Robinson, the same. I've been trying to schedule her to come on my show and talk about it, and we will. That is re-energizing me to follow up with that, so we will have just a better understanding, hopefully, of what happened in that case. So that's it for now. If you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that when I post new videos, you will be the first to know. And to find out more about the things that I care about, you can go to the written version of my journal. That's at eurweb.com. Thank you so much and have a super day.